Today's reading comes from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 8, beginning at verse 28. When he came to the other side, to the country of the Gadarenes, 2 demonics came out of the tombs and met him. They were so fierce that no one could pass that way. Suddenly they shouted, "What have you to do with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Now a large herd of swine was feeding at some distance from them. And the demons begged him, "If you cast us out, send us into the herd of swine." And he said to them, "Go." So they came out and entered the swine, and suddenly the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and perished in the water. The swineherds ran off, and on going into the town, they told the whole story about what had happened to the demonics. Then the whole town came out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they begged him to leave their neighbourhood.
Most days, I go for a good walk. Does me good, gives me time to myself to consider the affairs of the world. One of my favourite walks is in Shorthorn Wood, a well-developed coppice just above Throckmorton. It's away from the road and the traffic. The trees are well developed. There's good ground cover of scrub, the natural inhabitants, the deer, the foxes, the badgers, as well as a profusion of birds. This time of year, the new growth on the trees is beautiful. The highlight of my walk round the woods is the bird song. It's a real cacophony of sound. It sounds as if one bird is trying to outsing its neighbour. I love to hear it, but I know the birds are not singing for my benefit, but to comfort their mate who is sitting, and also to gently mark out its territory to the other birds. They all seem to live in harmony with each other. This made me think, what a pity it is that people cannot live like this. The birds and the animals behave perfectly naturally, but people have been given free will to choose exactly how they live, whether they follow Jesus or whether they live their own lives. This, of course, really does not happen when we follow Jesus. With him, what we see is what we get. He's always totally clear, totally consistent in what he has to offer us. If we consider our gospel reading today, we see an example of the inability of people to live with each other. We read of 2 men who were mentally ill and supposedly possessed by demons. Demons, always a power for evil, could manifest themselves in any part of the body, so it was believed. And the belief was that someone could be a host to many demons. The Jews believed that the demons were the eventual offspring of the fallen angels mentioned in the book of Genesis. They went from generation to generation, could only be destroyed with difficulty. However, they could be moved from one host to another. As I've already said, if someone was ill, the belief was that the cause of the illness was demon possession. These 2 men were probably mentally unsound, and probably continually told that they were possessed by demons. It's a fact, if you're told something often enough, you will believe it to be a reality. So this must have been the case with these 2 men, who believed that they were totally possessed by demons, and because of this were probably thrown out of their village, told to go and live elsewhere. Every town or village had a place for burial somewhere in the vicinity, and that was the usual place for the possessed to go and live. Life must have been pretty miserable. No doubt they were often cold and hungry. This would explain their shouting, asking for food in their frustration when none was forthcoming. This was what faced Jesus. He had crossed the Sea of Galilee into a Gentile land where Jewish law was not relevant. Did he mean to go there? Or was his boat swept there by the storm that we read of in the previous chapter of Matthew's Gospel? We can only survive, but we know he was happy to take his teaching to anyone who would listen. His reputation had probably gone before him, so the people knew what to expect from him. He probably started teaching. He must have been led out to the tomb to see these two men for himself, men who probably the villagers saw as a physical threat to them all. It's not uncommon in any village at the time to have a herd of pigs in the vicinity. Hygiene was primitive, the hedgerows were the convenience, and the pigs kept the area reasonably clean. That the pigs were in the area was noticed by Jesus, ever the pragmatist. Here he saw his opportunity. He told the demons to leave the demented men and go into the pigs. There was probably a lot of noise from both those who had taken Jesus to the tomb and from the men themselves. It was probably a coincidence that the pigs were spooked by the noise and took off into the water. The men then believed themselves to be cured and so could return to a dignified life. The people who had taken Jesus there were possibly as frightened as the pigs by what had happened and were not sure what to expect. So much so that they asked Jesus to go away. But they did believe that the demons had left their human habitation and gone into the pigs. Here we have an insight into human nature. Those who were looking after the pigs were far more upset by the loss of the pigs than they were by the salvation of these two men. Here is human selfishness at its worst. Today, we so often hear the cries of my rights or me. We see this today where vaccination or the partial lockdown is deferred. We see it in the knife-wielding youths of the inner cities, or the way that visitors leave the countryside. People are not concerned for the greater good of the general public, but only concerned with themselves. I accept that at times this can be tough, but in the end, it's the general welfare of everybody that should concern the Christian. We are reminded of the second commandment Jesus gave us: love your neighbour. That really is the lesson from our reading today. I wonder how we really react to this. Do we choose to pick our own way through life? Or do we follow Jesus and take to ourselves the love that he has to offer us? William Blake wrote a little poem which is quite appropriate. Love seeketh not itself to please, nor for itself hath any care, but for another gives its ease, builds a heaven in hell's despair. So sung a little clod of clay, trodden with the cattle's feet, but a pebble of the brook walked out these meters meet. Love seeketh only self to please, to bind another to its delight, joys in another's loss of ease, and builds a hell in heaven's respite. Food for thought, perhaps? I don't know. Amen.